All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's edition of the PHINUG Online Dev Sessions 2021 March. And yeah, magandang gabi sa lahat ng nandito ngayon. I'm John Limhap. I'm a principal developer for a company called PageUp, and I'm the community lead for the Philippine.NET users group. And tonight we have a double header of sorts, because aside from our main speaker, we're going to have going to have a lightning talk first, and we're going to have that lightning talk from someone who had been who had already been a guest of PHINUG in during our live sessions. It's his first time to speak for online, and then later on we're going to have our main event with the featured speaker. So before anything else, I'd like to thank the .NET Foundation and the .NET Virtual Users Group. They're the ones who are helping us host this event. And yeah, so sit back, relax. Hope that you enjoy this event. Our first speaker, and to talk to us about a technology that's we haven't seen much yet because it's very new, right? So most of the examples that you would hear of this technology, Blazor, which we talked about in our .NET Conf, that we actually had Rocky Lotka from Magenic talk about that. Um, yeah, so for many of us, Blazor would be something that is just theoretical or something that we're just playing with. Um, Somebody is here to talk to, and he will talk about using Blazor in production, and they're using it in production now. So to talk about Blazor in production and practical tips on that, please help me welcome Kedron Villena from Mindsy. Yeah.
Hey,
Good evening,
John.
Kedron. All
Good
right.
evening.
So I'll turn the floor over to you.
All right. Let me start by sharing my screen, or are you going to
Mm,
switch it, John?
I'm gonna stop sharing. Give me a moment.
Okay. Thank you. Hi, everyone.
Yes. Oh, there's your.
Okay. All right. Can I start now, John?
Yes. Yes. Go ahead.
All right. So, hi, everyone, to all the viewers. So, good evening. And yeah. So, I'm not sure, as what John mentioned, basically, Blazor has been presented before, right? And actually, there are only a few companies who are actually using it in production, and I can say that we're actually one of those few companies that is actually using this in production, that is using Blazor in production. But before I dive into that one, I want to give first a quick introduction of what Blazor is, right? So without further ado, let's start with the slide. So the first slide would be C Sharp. So in this one, so typically, when you do web development, the combination is usually HTML plus CSS plus JavaScript, right? This is the very common foundational stack if you want to build web applications or if you want to build rich and beautiful web applications. But my question is JS really necessary? I'm not saying we remove it, but the question would be, are we really gonna be stuck with JavaScript? Is it really possible to have another language replace JavaScript? So if let's say if we replace it with C Sharp, for example, in this case, is it possible to have HTML, CSS, and C Sharp? Can we really achieve something like this? So this actually answered, it's actually happening already, and it's actually answered by Blazor. So let's start with what is Blazor, followed by why should you use Blazor, and then I'm going to show you real-world experiences, actually production real-world experiences with Blazor. So first is, what is Blazor? Like, in order for us to answer this question, I want to give you a quick background of what happened in JavaScript, I think around 2009. So around 2009, Node.js was introduced to the industry. What happened is that instead of JavaScript just being a language for the browser, it actually became a full stack language, meaning you can actually do full stack development with JavaScript. You can actually connect to databases now, create web API endpoints, all because of Node.js. And of course, because of JavaScript. And as you know, what we've seen from what's happening right now, React and Angular, all those kinds of frameworks are actually evolving. You can now even use them on mobile phones. So if you know JavaScript, basically you can also be a mobile developer now, right? So what happened with C Sharp? With Blazor, C Sharp actually became a full stack development as well, not just for the web, but also, I mean, not just for the desktop applications or backends, it also became one for the web itself. Wait, kid, isn't that weird? We have ASP.NET MVC. We have the CSHTML. We have this Razor pages. So why do we need Blazor? Or what's different with Blazor? What's new about it, right? What is Blazor really? I'm going to show you in the next slide in here. I'm actually showing you side by side an actual application that is not served by any backend, but it's rather being executed by the browser in itself. Or if a more formal term for this would be a single page application, right? If you look on the left side of the screen, I'm not sure if you can see my mouse. John, can they see my mouse? Hopefully they can. So
Yes, they can. Yes.
okay, thank you for that. So if you look at the left side, we have this web application, and we have this simple page here. We have a counter, and on the right side, we actually have a C# snippet, which is called it's actually in the Razor format. On the top of the page, it means just like a page, like a routing element. It means that if you go to /counter, you're actually going to be seeing this page. The H1, typically HTML elements, right? And then we have the paragraph here, like a P element. And what's interesting about this one is this one, the current count, and the code section below. Why? If you look at the code section below, it's C#. If you look at this one, it's referring to at current count, which is the variable in C#. And you have the on-click button, like you have a button here, and there's an on-click parameter, and there's an increment. It's just calling the method. Okay, isn't this just a typical code? Well, you might say so, but in reality, the C# code is being executed by the browser. There's no JavaScript involved, literally zero JavaScript. It's all pure C# code, meaning the browser is actually executing and is reading your C# code in a sense. All right. So you might be wondering, how is this possible? How can we actually use Blazor, or how can the browser actually use C#? Okay. So to answer that question, we actually need to see how it's happening inside the browser. So on the next slide, we can actually see this one. So inside the browser, there's a concept of DOM elements, right? I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with DOM elements, but basically those are just your HTML, and it's formatted in an object model. And then you have the Blazor stack. We have what we call I think this is the most, like one of the recent technologies in the industry, WASM, or WebAssembly. Basically what happened is that the .NET runtime was actually compiled, or is actually basically was built for WebAssembly. WebAssembly is a common binary instruction set that the browser knows. So let's say you have your own runtime or you have your application. If you actually recompile them to actually adhere to the WebAssembly standards, your browser can basically execute it. This is what's happening. And then we have the Razor components, which includes the C# code, and it's running on top of the .NET, which is actually running on top of the WebAssembly, right? So this is actually one of the flavors of Blazor. This is what we call Blazor WASM, or the Blazor WebAssembly, as they call it. But there's another section to it. The next section to it is what we call this one, the Blazor server. All right. The Blazor server is another flavor of Blazor, wherein what's happening is that you have the DOM elements here, and basically your Blazor server is the one who's actually managing all the pre-rendering. It's keeping track of the injections and everything, and it's actually sending those elements via signal R to the browser. And if there are any changes, like a mouse click or of some sort, it's actually going to be sent back to the to the server, and the server will reevaluate it and give back the updated DOM, or like a section of the DOM component, to the browser. This is the second flavor of Blazor. So if you look at the two flavors, there are different ways to use Blazor. One is the typical, going back to my previous slide, is the WebAssembly part. The second one is the server side part. Another comparison would be, think of the server side as your Angular or as your React application. Basically, you're giving everything to the browser and so up to the browser to execute it. So why is WASM interesting, or why is WebAssembly interesting? It's because of this one. If you go to roadmap.sh/frontend, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with this website. The very last thing, or the latest one on the roadmap, it's actually called the WebAssembly. This is actually a very, very new technology in the industry. It's already in 1.0, but it's already supported by the 4 major browsers: Firefox, Chrome, Edge, and Safari. So if you're really interested with keeping up with the technology, then Blazor is something that you really need to look at, especially Blazor Wasm. But also a good alternative would be Blazor Server. So let's talk about this next question. Why should you use Blazor? Short answer, basically you're a .NET developer and you like this one, C#, basically. C# for everywhere, because you want C# to be everywhere and you love C#. Okay? I'm going to talk about some of the advantages on a theoretical level. After that, I'm going to go on a production level standpoint. Here's some of the advantages. One language rule them all. You don't need to learn JavaScript. You can just use C#. Okay? Not all the time, but basically C# can already suffice. Faster development. Of course, so if you know C#, you don't have to study like what promises are, what is the for each syntax in JavaScript, what are the dictionary in JavaScript, those kinds of things, because you're using C# basically. You can also take advantage of C# features. Most, if not all, features are already available to you, regardless if you are on the Blazor server or if you're on the Blazor Wasm side of things. All right. Now let's talk about some of the disadvantages. For the disadvantages, I'm going to answer them as well from a real-world experience with Blazor. All right? So let's talk about some of the positive points first before we go to the negative side. Integration with Azure, it's much easier. Of course, definitely, it's a .NET product, right? It's very easy to connect all of them together. And deploying them on Azure is very easy. Also, if you're using Blazor Server, we have this Azure Signal R as a service, so we can just take advantage of it. Basically, it's going to help your application scale more if you're using Blazor Server. I think the second one is actually a very important thing to note. If you're using C#, connectivity to Active Directories or basically to legacy apps is very easy. Let's say you're using JavaScript to connect to an Active Directory. You need to use a lot of libraries, and sometimes most of them doesn't even work in order for you to connect to it. But if you're using C#, Microsoft is even providing them for free on NuGet via NuGet packages. So it's very much easy to integrate with big systems, especially with like those big enterprises, right? And actually, the third one is the most important part of me. Focusing on delivering features, not on learning technologies. I was able to build a scheduling app for the web application in 30 minutes. Take note, it's feature rich. It doesn't really look good since I'm not really good at CSS, but the features are really, really there. So if you think about it, if we're actually going to be starting one from Angular or from React, you need to understand what are components in Angular and React, what are promises, how do you do an API call. You need to understand how to secure your endpoints via JAW tokens, how to connect to them, how to do paging, those kinds of things. And it's going to be really, really hard since you still need to learn those things, right? But with Blazor, well, it's basically make things easier since you're just focusing on delivering the features, not learning technologies. Now let's talk about some of the real points, the negative ones. First one, if you're using Blazor server, latency can be an issue. If you have a server in the US and you're in the Philippines, of course, there's going to be some delay since Signal R keeps the connection, right? It switches between WebSockets, server, or long polling. But bottom line, it can be a bottleneck. But there are ways to mitigate it. You can leverage Azure or create another instance of your server. It's also possible, but it can be an issue. Next one, C# is definitely not JavaScript. Sometimes you need to actually use JavaScript or NPM libraries. And the good thing is Blazor can interop with JavaScript. I actually wrote a blog about this one. You can actually use your NPM packages with this one. I just forgot to send the link, but it's on my Medium account. But it's very easy to interact with JavaScript. And JavaScript can call C#, and C# can call JavaScript, vice versa. So basically, they're very interoperable. Last one, it's debugging is a pain in the, why? Because C# doesn't support, for example, Blazor server, it doesn't support hot reloading. You have to do .NET Watch, but it's gonna recompile it every now and then. So hopefully it can be addressed soon, but it's one of the difficulties in actually debugging this one. But to be honest with you, all of the negative ones is actually being outweighed by the positive ones, meaning all the positive ones actually basically it outweighs the negative ones. I don't think that even if we're encountering these challenges real time or in production, we're not switching away from Blazor right now because we were able to deliver more features than studying new technologies. And imagine we can actually stream lots and lots of data. We're actually streaming data that contains around 500,000 rows, and the browser is not even complaining about it. We're actually able to handle them properly. We don't need to care about the paging and everything because it's being handled by Blazor in itself. So I guess that's a quick summary of us doing it in production. We're going to be doing another talk soon in June, probably, or July, about this one. We're gonna go more deep dive in terms of what we're doing and how we're using it with Blazor and in production. So hopefully, guys, I can see you in that talk. So now let's proceed with some of the questions. I think I still have some time, John. Maybe I can answer some of the questions on
Yes,
the chat.
yes, you do.
Okay.
Thanks for that for that great talk. I think some of the questions here are actually very relevant to the things that you've already discussed. So, first question that we have is from
Mhm.
Luis Coelho. One of my difficulties is to understand when to choose Blazor server versus the WASM version on real world scenarios. When to choose one over the other. Um,
All
Kedren?
right. Okay, thank you, Luis. To answer your question, if you have an application that is already built and you're really good at web APIs, you have your web APIs in place already, definitely go with Wasm. But take note, there's a loading time in Wasm, so you have to be careful with that one. My suggestion is if you really want to take advantage of Blazor, I suggest going with Blazor Server. But there are downsides to it, like you need to manage the scaling and everything. But Blazor Server basically makes web development really, really easy. You don't need to understand what web APIs are. Basically, it's all happening flawlessly. And of course, integrating with something like Azure B2D, I forget exact term, authentication is very easy as well.
Hmm, hmm.
Mhm.
All right,
So I said,
that's
yeah, it's gonna be your your case, I guess.
yeah. All right. Another question from Programming Mania. Do you think WebAssembly will replace? Hmm. Will replace? I'm curious if he means JavaScript or JavaScript DOM. At some point in the future. Maybe that's what he meant by that.
Let's try to answer both sides, I guess, John. So
Mm-hmm,
to answer the JavaScript DOM, I don't think so. Well, it
mm-hmm,
might, but yeah, I honestly I don't think that it will replace JavaScript. What's gonna happen is it's gonna live alongside JavaScript. That's definitely the right answer to it. So I don't think it will kill or it will replace, but definitely it will live alongside with it. For example, even for the legacy languages, it's still there, right? So I don't
mm-hmm.
think that it's gonna be replacing it, but definitely we're gonna be seeing more cool stuff with Wasm, and it's just the tip of the iceberg for Blazor.
Yeah. The way that I expect this to happen in the future is that for it won't really replace. It's just more like you know how C++ is still being used today when you want certain levels of performance or
Yeah,
certain levels of hardware compatibility, for example. So JavaScript will still be your default browser
yeah,
or default web environment language, and then these are your alternatives that they help you they help you produce apps faster. But if you want to push the pedal to the metal, you'll have to go with the ones that work natively with the browsers. So that's almost always JavaScript.
definitely. And
Yeah.
it's like, just to add to your input, John, it's like, for example, if you want to access the webcam, right now there's
Mhm.
no direct way to access the webcam via Blazor. So you need to use NPM libraries for that one. So it's still JavaScript, right?
Yeah, yeah. That is true. That is true. All right. I'm trying to wait for other people that we have the questions. So thank you to everyone that are here. Kedren, do you want to talk about more about what you do in your company?
Yeah, sure.
Anything about where or where they can catch you next if you have another event.
Yeah, sure. Definitely. So just to give you a quick of a background, so how we're using Blazor in production on my company, I guess that's going to be the helpful one. So what we're doing is what we call process mining. It's a very new thing in the industry, and what's happening is we're actually streaming a lot of data, like literally 500,000 rows of data to 100,000 rows of data. And actually, I can't really think of another way to do it if we don't use Blazor. That's
Mm-hmm.
how critical Blazor for us is right now. There are ways to do it, but it's gonna take us months and months of studying just to be able to achieve it. But with Blazor, it's like a snap. We can actually just throw in those data to the browser, and it's handling it nicely and done. Like it even supports virtualization by default. So imagine instead of you doing those pagination part, you can just use virtualization. So that's how good
Mm-hmm.
it is. And I think for my next talks, hopefully it's still gonna be PHINUG, but I don't have any lined up yet. If there's one, I'm gonna mention it to you, John. Oh, by the
All
way,
right.
John, if these guys want to contact me, they can. My contacts are actually in the slides
Yeah.
right now. And I think we have
Yeah.
one more question.
Yeah. Just one more question just came in from Jojo Aquino. So how is Blazor similar to HTML over WebSockets, and what are its limitations?
That's a very good question. When you say HTML over WebSockets, think of it like this. You have your normal web page and it's connecting to a WebSocket. It's streaming data back and forth, right? The problem is that sometimes the browser needs to optimize some things and you need to set up a lot of things in order for that to happen. But if you're actually going to be using Blazor server, it's like you can actually just stream your dictionary of data to the other end and the browser will definitely get it. And think of it as basically Blazor is already using Signal R as a default. If you use HTML over WebSockets, you still need to do a lot of coding in terms of basically you need to set up your Signal R, your WebSockets. What happens if the WebSockets fail? What's your redundancy or what's your backup plan? If you use Signal R, that is being used by Blazor server. Basically, it automatically switches to long polling or to server if that happens. So it will try its best to keep the connection alive. So I guess that's one of the big differences. And I think, to be honest, the optimizations being done by the Blazor server when it's transferring DOM data to the browser side, I think it's much better than doing the typical HTML over WebSockets.
Mhm. We have another question from
Mhm.
Luis. Do you foresee any integration issues with some known platforms and tools like MongoDB, EF Core, etc.? Or maybe even RepoDB, which we will talk about after this.
Yeah. To be honest, two sides of the coin. Blazor Wasm doesn't connect to database, so that's out of the question, right? It's still up to your backend to do that one. Blazor server, no. Why? Because it's very different. It's like your Blazor server is connecting to the database, so it's two different entities. If C# or .NET can connect without problems to your platforms and tools, then by all means, you can definitely do it. It's not impossible, right? Like if your C# code is connecting perfectly with MongoDB, EF Core, then why not? We're actually using EF Core. We're using EF Core for our queries, for our Blazor server. It's working really, really awesome and great for us.
That's good to know. That's good to know. All right, and final question from Luis again. Is
Mhm.
it worth it to start a new project using Blazor rather than Angular or React? And
That's a very
controversial question, I guess.
right.
Yeah.
I think I can answer the Angular side, not the React one. I've used Angular for 2 years and we've been using it in production. And honestly, Angular has been really great. It's opinionated, the TypeScript. It's really, really awesome to use Angular. But I've been with C# for the last 8 years, if I'm not mistaken. When I started a new project with React, with Blazor, it's like, oh, it's easy. Very, very, very easy. I came from Angular. I also have background on React. When I transitioned to Blazor, it's very easy. My suggestion is if you want to deliver features really, really fast and timeline is and deadlines is of the essence, go with Blazor. Definitely, that's my take on it. And if you don't care about some loading times on when your application loads, go with Blazor. It's a no-brainer choice for me.
All right. Okay, I guess that's it for this talk. Thank you very much. I mean, that was a very quick talk, but the insights that you've given us are really good and valuable. I guess for a lot of people and companies that are starting to consider using Blazor, and yeah, they basically just want some people or some companies to go ahead and encounter basically be the tip of the spear and find the problems for them, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah,
have their
so
own
that
architecture, whatever. Yeah.
yeah, so that's very valuable. So yeah, I guess that ends this segment. Thank you so much, Kedren. That
Thank you
was
so much, John.
a very quick but very insightful and a very nice talk on Blazor. And yeah, we learned a lot about it. And yeah, I was certainly for myself. It's one of the questions that even not really my company, but myself for personal projects. It's one of my questions of whether this is worth investing in. So that's really good there. All right. I think Luis has one last question there, and Kedren, I suppose I'd leave it up to you to answer that in the chat, if that's okay.
Yeah, I'll do it.
All right. Thanks. Okay. Yeah. Just for those who are curious, that question was about security and releasing security patches and all of that. So I'd wait for Kedren's answer on that. But I do not want to delay our time for our main speaker that we are going to have. So before but before we proceed to him, yeah, I would just like to take this opportunity again to thank the .NET Foundation and the Virtual .NET Users Group for facilitating this live stream. They're the ones who are it's their StreamYard account actually that's allowing us to stream this, and it's their YouTube channel, and they've supported us for the past few months. And yeah, thank you so much for that. We look forward to working together in the next few months for more of these streams. Okay, on to our next event. So one of the things that for our Filipino devs here, one of the questions they asked is, "Oh, well, wouldn't it be great if for Pinoy devs basically have a lot of presence in the OSS world?" And to be honest, there had been actually a lot of Filipinos participating in different projects, and in the past, one of the significant projects actually still with a very similar technology. So, if you were all familiar with NHibernate actually used a library called Cecil, and Cecil was a OSS project paid by a Pinoy developer who's now based in Australia, Philip Loriano. But yeah, after his stint, um, I was pleasantly surprised middle of last year when I learned about. Actually, it was a late learning. Some of my friends have heard about this project for a few years now, and yeah, it's an honor to have him on board for us to do our main talk. So I'd like to introduce a senior app architect for Ørsted and the author of RepoDB, which is a hybrid ORM. Um, Let us welcome Mr. Michael Pendon. Hi, Michael.
Hi, June. Good evening.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you
Good
for
evening.
inviting me here.
Yeah.
Hi,
Well,
everyone.
you're based in what country? I always
Yeah.
forget which. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm currently a resident in Denmark, and I'm
Mhm.
also working here in Denmark, in
Okay.
Ørsted.
Okay. All right. All right. Cool. So I guess you could share your screen.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, June. And I'm sure
Sure.
my screen.
Sure. So I'd let you take it away, and let's talk about
Yes.
RepoDB.
Yeah, but first of all, I would like to say thank you so much, June, for inviting me to be a speaker of tonight's show in PHINUG online dev session for March, and also for the earlier speaker. I guess I also learned about Blazor. I am actually a back-end developer historically and a little bit in UI, but it seems that Blazor is actually a really exciting tool and a technology to use to. It's a really cool presentations. I learned a lot on that 30-minute session. Thanks for that. So I'm gonna start the presentation here, but I'm gonna change the presenter here. So I am Michael Pendon. I'm the author of RepoDB ORM, and that's gonna be the topic for tonight. And before we dive down into the actual session, I'm gonna tell you what's gonna be the importance on this session right now that I'm going to showcase to you. Actually, this will provide you the detailed overview of the library, both the features and the functionalities. And because of this, it will help you solve the real complex edge cases in relation to the data access space in .NET. And let's start with the questions. Actually, what is RepoDB? RepoDB is an open source .NET ORM library that bridges the gaps of micro-ORMs and macro-ORMs, or aka Full-ORMs, also known as Full-ORMs. And it helps you simplify the switch over when to use the basic and advanced operations during the development. And I actually try to make the bold gaps here. And what are these gaps that I'm trying to say? It's actually the methods and operations available from the ORM, the one that you are using, and the list of the simplified features that is being offered by the ORM, the capabilities of the given features and operations, and the influences on the way how you implement and design the application architecture, and many more. So we're trying to somehow eliminate those gaps between this the micro-ORM and full-ORMs, and how is it differed from the two very popular ORM. So Entity Framework developed by Microsoft, full-fledged ORM, and almost has everything. Dapper developed by Stack Overflow, the most lightweight ORM in the market, and you need to issue a SQL statement at all times. Whereas RepoDB is actually the one with which the developers mostly need features from both Entity Framework and Dapper ORM. You can open a connection as simple as Dapper and execute the operations as simple as Entity Framework. Note that RepoDB Core and Dapper are considered the bare metal ORMs. And also, I would like to make a disclaimer on this page that I'm not putting RepoDB on the same level as Dapper and Entity Framework, but I actually use these two ORMs to become the benchmark when it comes to the features for Entity Framework and Dapper for the performance. And that's the reason why I'm actually putting it here. And the supported relational database management system are SQL Server, PostgreSQL, MySQL, and SQLite. And if you are using the core of RepoDB, it's same as Dapper. It support any RDBMS, even the OLE connections or databases. So, but if you are going to utilize the actual packaging for DB providers, these are the four supported, main supported RDBMS, and we are also trying to support the Firebird in moving forward, and also the Snowflakes, and also the MariaDB, and additional for Oracle. That's going to be the future. Below are the features available on this ORM. So we support asynchronous operations, batch and bulk operations, caching second layer, class handlers, connection persistency, dynamic operations, expression trees, flow-end operations, explicit and implicit mapping, inline hints, multi-result set query, property handlers, repositories, statement building, tracing, transaction, and type mapping. But on this demo, if you try to follow my show in Microsoft earlier, it was actually only 4 features, but here I'm trying to make it more 7 features I'm going to showcase. So we will cover the features below, actually the one in the bold. So in this session, and I will do my best to beat the time. And I will explain each features before we go to the actual demo. So batch and bulk operations. It allows the users to execute multiple records at one time, proving solutions to the data access performance problems for enterprise applications. Batch is a concept of executing multiple single executions at one go, whereas the bulk is also a concept of covering all the desired information in the execution at one go. It can execute 100,000 or multiple thousands or million of rows without having the performance being affected that much. So they're just a concept, but also on this concept, we try to implement the actual implementations of these two concepts. And I'm gonna showcase that one later. Caching is allow the users to temporarily store the data into the memory or any other caching storage. For example, if you are using file, like you can use JSON or XML, you can even utilize the existing technology like memcache or even a localized database like SQLite or whatever kind of caching you would like to. You can even put settings or configuration file if you would like to. And RepoDB is actually extensible when it comes to this one. Class handler, the next feature, it's actually able the users to handle, the developers to handle the serializations or deserialization and or hydration process of the model. So think of it that if you are reading the data from the database, you can handle the way how you hydrate the model. And if you're pushing the data towards the database, you can handle or validate the information before you actually push that one to the database. And this is actually the use case mostly being solved by the class handlers. And the property handlers is the same as class handler, but it is designed to cater only the specific property of the class or the model. So it's almost the same. The next feature is repository. It's allow the users to organize and simplify the implementation of the data access layers. And in RepoDB, we have two kinds of repository. We have DB repository. It is used for implementing a dynamic repository, and the base repository is used for implementing an entity-based repository. A little bit example for this one. If you are using DB repository, if you have a database and you would like to work on all tables in that database, go for the DB repository. But if you would like to make sure that your repository is actually based on the table level, entity-based, then go to the base repository. And on this example later I'm going to showcase the base repository. Dynamic operations. This is the feature that would allow the users to create and simplify the targeted operation by simply maximizing the usage of anonymous types. I would say dynamic types in general in .NET. It is very useful if you wish to do CRUD operations on the targeted columns and or make the CRUD operations without even having a class model or entity. And the disclaimer for this is that the feature is called dynamics in a context of an ORM, but don't get confused this dynamic terminology in RepoDB against the dynamics terminology against the .NET ecosystem. I will explain that one. Here, RepoDB supports different kind of dynamics like expand object, anonymous type, dictionary string object, and such kind of things. They are supported. Sorry for that. And tracing is actually the features that would allow the users to debug and trace the actual executions of the library. And the question here is something like, why are you going to use RepoDB? So it is generally very fast in fetch, save, delete, update, and all operations, push and pull operations. So it has an out-of-the-box support for atomic, batch, and bulk operations. It's very efficient in memory usage. It's a lightweight, no change tracking, no extra calculations. So unlike Entity Framework that you are actually having this change tracking things, right? But RepoDB is a bit a bare metal and a bit lower level when it comes to that. And hybrid-ORM, it's easy to switch between massive and micro-ORMs operations, and the only identified ORM framework in .NET that supports this fast switching capability. And it's also the reason why it's very to use. As the most simple ORM to use in the market right now for .NET, and it only takes 10 seconds to install. In the 5 here, I want to put a disclaimer on my wordings about the simplest ORM. That is because if you are using Dapper, you open a connection and execute the SQL statement, right? In RepoDB, you open a connection and call the operation. That's how simple it is. Nothing else to do. Just open the connection and call the operation. It will do their job. Things like that. Mm-hmm. Then let's go to the demo. So actually, I have 3 solutions here, but I'll go first on the first one. The first project that I created is a .NET 5 project, a very simple API that contains the CRUD operations. I already have created the objects here in preparation for this demo to beat the time, and I'm going to explain one by one what I have done here before we go proceed with it. So first, I created an iRepository. It's a very simple interface that has these 5 methods. I mean, these methods of CRUD, 6 methods. It's accept a generic type of T, which is actually the model that we will going to work on against the database. And then I created a model called person, and this person model has 4 properties. And then these properties, I start with a string here, so that's later I'm going to showcase about the address model. But these properties here is actually equivalent to what I have in the database. So I'm using the local MySQL SQL Server database on my local machine, and I already have prepared those single table person that has 4 columns equivalent to those table. On this demo, we will just do it a direct access only from one entity to the actual table in the database. And on top of that, I created an interface called iPerson repository, a simple repository, and that implements the iRepository that uses the model person that we're going to use. And here I also created a repositories class, person repository that inherits the base repository of RepoDB. I didn't share it earlier, but I already have installed the package of RepoDB. So I have installed the package RepoDB, RepoDB.SQL Server, and RepoDB.SQL Server.bulk operations. If you don't want bulk operations, you can remove this one. But I already have pre-installed this one on this project. So now I have inherited the base repository, and here I'm saying that I would like to work on the person model, and I would like to connect to the SQL connection, I mean to the SQL database. If I'm using Postgre, you can use something like NPG SQL connection, or SQLite connection, or MySQL connection, MySQL connector connection, something like that. And also iPerson repository, I implemented the existing repository that I created here for me to be able to implement those methods that I needed to. And once you have inherited the base repository of RepoDB, if I'm going to call the Blazor, you already have inherited all the methods of RepoDB. So here it contains all the methods you can actually utilize against your database. And you can do the insert, you can do the merge, you can do the insert all, which is actually the batch operations, things like that. Now you can do that, and then in every method that I had here, I don't need to write SQL statement for that. I don't need to open a connection. I don't need to pass the parameters. But all I'm going to have to do is to just simply call RepoDB base method. So for the delete, I use the delete method and pass the primary key. It can also pass whatever you would like to, like expressions, for example, something like e.name, something like that. Like Entity Framework, as you do, is also supported. You can also pass a query objects. It's something like a new query object, things like that, and then do the things. You can also pass a dynamic object or anonymous type on this. And also for the get, same as the delete, you can also do it like that. But I'm just use the query method, and then for the get all, it's a query all method, and merge for the merge method. And I also use the name as the qualifier, but it's not limited only to one qualifier. By default, it's using the ID, but here I force the name because I'm going to explain it later. And you can also utilize multiple qualifiers. For example, if you have an SSN and you would like to use the last name here as the qualifier, usually like that, right, in the system, then you can do it like that. But for now, on this demo, I'm going to use single qualifier. And for the save, I just use the insert, return the long as the primary key, and the entity, just insert it, and then update, just use the update method of the base. And this is how it is. And when it comes to the registration of the repository, first, before you actually start working with RepoDB, you have to call the bootstrapper. So every package that you have installed in your solutions via RepoDB, you need to call the initializer. Initializer is actually the one that will going to initialize all the settings needed in order for you to work on the specific database RDBMS. And here it's very simple connection string. I'm connected to my local server or demo RepoDB database. Integrated security is actually mine as an admin. And I just created a singleton repository as a sample here, and then I pass my new repository. And here, guys, you can see that it's maybe not the best patterns but this is just a demo. So please FYI, that is a very simple project for this demo. And for the patterns and practices is a different thing. And here you can see, usually in the controller, we post the services or managers or business layers, right? But here in this demo, I'm going to use the repository directly just to showcase the purpose of RepoDB. And then in this repository, I also created the necessary method to call the method from the repository. As you can see here, we have a get all, things like that, and get, and then merge. And then I'm going to build this project and then run it. So it's take a little while to build this one. Yes, cool. And while we are waiting to run this project on my local machine, I have opened a lot of instances here. So I also have the Postman here, and I use this tool rather than the one that has been generated by the Swagger. So I'm gonna use the Postman at least for this example, for me to be able to control everything, the calls on the actual API that this one. But eventually the .NET 5 is actually automatically integrated into Swagger, as you can see here. Yeah. But here the sample is actually I use the Postman here, so it's I already predefined the methods needed for this for me to be able to call the operations. And here in the database, I'm gonna make a query against the person table. And you can see that this person table is actually still empty, right? And here I'm gonna call first the save operation. I'm calling the save method here, and then I'm passing myself my name here, and then click the send. And now it's actually using those insert operations of RepoDB, and you can see that the ID1 has been resulted here, and you can see in the database that the record has been inserted. And for the get all, just simply call the get all operation, which is the query method or query all method of RepoDB, and that returns you the data against the database. And here the merge, a very simple call. It's something like that. I'm using my name as the qualifier, and then I realized that actually not from Copenhagen, but right now I'm actually living in Gentofte, for example, in Denmark. And then I'm gonna send this one. You can see that I know that Michael Pendon is now existing in the database, and I'm gonna update that record. Rather than inserting a new one. The purpose of the merge operation is that if the record is present in the database, it will update it. Otherwise, it will insert it. And then, for example, just to play around with it, I put something like Michael Kamara, that's my middle name here, and then send it. So the record has been inserted in the database because Michael Kamara is not yet in the database, right? So things like that. So that's actually the purpose of it. And then if you're going to make a delete, and then just simply pass those ID number 2, I'm gonna delete those person 2 has been deleted in the database. And same goes with the other methods. It's almost the same, like Entity Framework, and that is how it is. So the one that I actually showcased to you earlier is actually the repository, and how it's actually simple to how simple it is to implement repository via RepoDB. And then the next topic and features that I'm going to showcase to you is actually the caching second layer, which is a bit important feature. In RepoDB, by default, it's actually using the memory cache object of RepoDB. So there is what we call memory cache object, not the memory cache of .NET, because I think we need to somehow customize the way how we do caching with RepoDB. So it's interface-based implementation, and you can also create your own memory cache or own caching just by simply implementing the iCache object of RepoDB or interface and inject it here. But now we will not gonna do that, since we are using the base repository. Base repository will manage everything, and the default is being placed in the memory of your computer or the server where the RepoDB is actually running or the application is deployed. And if you're actually calling the fetch operation like execute query and query all and query, there's a possibility that you can pass a cache key here. And the recommendation for this is something like that. For this one is actually person, and I'm gonna put people. I'm gonna cache them. And the recommendation for this is that if you have a table in the database that is not frequently changing, that is actually the candidate of for caching. So it's actually a static table or shared table or some lookup table, list of products from your website that is not commonly changing, or list of customers, for example. If you think it's not changing much, then you can actually cache them. And then so here I just put a people here, and then of course by default it's actually RepoDB. It's actually retains, and the retention period is 180 minutes, which is 3 hours. But you can always change that one. You can just simply pass the retention period here in the overloaded methods. As you can see, the cache item expiration here, you can just pass it anytime you would like to, and that would change the cache item expiration of the cache. And if you would like to purge the information of the cache, you can just simply access the cache object property of the base repository, and then you can add customized cache if you would like to. You can clear it, you can remove, and you can also iterate the object itself if you would like to just show all the cache that you have. And that's actually important if you would like to manage the cache by yourself. And if I'm going to run this one again.
Yeah, Mike. Just want to ask everyone that if they have questions about this, please feel free to ask your questions on the chat.
Yes.
And I encourage everyone to ask their questions. But
yes. Yeah, that's okay, Sir John. Just let me know if there's a question so I can also answer that while I'm doing the demo. So
sure.
So here we already have one record in the database. You can see earlier, but I've sent something like I'm gonna put something like Juan De La Cruz here, or Jando, something like Manila, Philippines, and then run it. Now you can see that I have 2 records in the database, right? Is it save that I have? Yes, it's 3. It has created the 3 here. You can see that I have 2 records already in the database. And if I'm going to call the get all, you can see that after you get those records from the database, and you can see that the time took is actually 115 milliseconds. And the second time I call this one, it will only take 16 milliseconds, because the second call is already happening or retrieving the information from the cache and not from the database. As you can see, it even lower sometimes. It's become more faster. And here you can see, if I'm going to truncate, let's say I'm going to truncate the table here. And there is no record now in the database, right? RepoDB would still have those records because it's already cached using those people cache key earlier. And until the application is stopped, then it will actually remove from the cache, or until the expiration date of 3 hours is actually lapsed, that will remove the cache there. So that's actually the caching mechanism of RepoDB. And then the next feature that I'm going to showcase is actually the tracing. So John, it's also okay if we can take all the questions at the end of the sessions, and
Yeah.
then we can consolidate all of those, and then I will answer everything. And so for the next is actually the tracing. So the tracing is actually the capability for you to be able to see what's really happening in your executions before and after. And here you can see that the iTrace interface is provided to you for you to be able to create your own trace. It creates all the methods for every operation in RepoDB before and after. Before is actually being triggered before the actual executions against the database, and after is actually the one that is being executed after the executions against the database. And here you can see as well that on the before, it's actually cancelable trace log. So it means that if you saw that this execution is a bit, it's a fraud execution, it's not really for this meant or this purpose, it means that you can always cancel that operations. You can throw the exception back to the caller. And it's also inherited the trace log, which is actually the one the same as what we have in the after, which contains the session ID, the result, the parameter, and the statement. I will showcase it to you. So here, after you have created all those cache, this object, my cache, your trace object that inherits the iTrace interface of RepoDB, all you're gonna have to do in the repository is that to just inject it. So you can see it here. This base, you can see it. Actually, there's an overloaded method here, but you can also inject the iTracer if you would like to. And I suggest for you to have a dependency injection here, or IOC part of the iTrace implementations. In this example, I just used this object instantiation just for this purpose. But the best is actually to DI this thing. Okay. And then so now all I'm gonna have to do is just to inject it, and I'll have the trash, and then I have the tracer, and then I just put a comment or a breakpoint on the method that I would like to trace, something like that, and then maybe log it in the console or the log file or in the application insights. Then I'll showcase it. I mean, I'll run the application, and then I call the operations. So now it's running. Before the demo, it's actually very fast, and then during the actual demo, it's a bit slow, and I don't know what happened. So, but yes, here you can see, I'm gonna insert a record here. So I'm gonna put something like Jando, for example, and he's from New York, USA. And then I'm gonna send this one. And see RepoDB actually breakpointed into the before insert, because that's the before insertions happen. And if I'm going to somehow what we call see what's happening here, RepoDB give you the statement that has been composed by default for you. So it's inserting the records into this table, passing this address, and this is also returning the newly created scope identity, because it's actually identity column, my ID. And here you can see as well that I can also see the statement, the session ID, which is actually the session based on also the parameter that I also pass from the client. And the session is actually the one that you are actually used for instance, if you are actually doing it in the after insertion. So 87cc, for example, and I'm gonna run this one, continue. And now the same session is here, 87cc. And then you can still reference those one, and then you can see that the parameter is the same, but you have the result already here, and the statement is the same, right? And then you can see in the database that this Jando is now actually inserted. And you can see also the elapsed time, how fast it is being inserted into the database. That's the execution time of the operations. And also it's the same as what we have if we are going to make a get all here. So in the get all, you can see here, for example, what's the statement, what's the session ID, and what's the execution time. And to give you example how to utilize this cancelable trace log, this is the example that I really would like to, that if you can audit the thing. So for example, if log that statement that contains delete. So for example, this is just a sample, right? And you see that, oh, this is really fraud because this is actually for query all, but somebody injected a new builder in RepoDB, and all they're gonna have to do is to delete it. For example, there's a library who created this one, right? Who created this new SQL Server builder, and they actually would like to inject something in your database, and then you accidentally reference that package, and then you can ask something like cancel that automatic, and then throw the exception back to the caller. So this is just for the purpose of security, for example. But you can also do whatever you would like to, just to trace the operation. So, and then I'm gonna run this one, and you can see that also the after query, you can see how actually fast it is, and also the result set here. So you can see there's only one record from the database. So that's actually the tracing, and I'm gonna jump into the next topic. But before that, I'm gonna remove the tracing here so that it will not actually provide noise in the future discussions. The next feature I'm going to showcase is actually the person class center. Yes, Sir Jun.
Yeah, just wanted to say that wow, there's a lot of, this is pretty packed with a lot of stuff already, and yeah, I have one question that I'm itching to ask you from now. How did you arrive? Let me show myself here. But how did you arrive from that process of I need an ORM to I'm going to write my own ORM? I mean, I'm pretty sure that There's a
Oh,
lot of
yeah, yeah.
features here that I'm curious if they're present in Dapper. I'm not as familiar with I with the caching mechanisms in Dapper or with yeah, with any of the other features that
Yes.
you've gone so far. So yeah, yeah, I'm curious what the story is about
Yeah, yeah.
RepoDB.
It's 2018. I actually, it's I'm historically, I'm actually maybe would like to say maybe something like I mastered ADO.NET, so connected and
Okay,
disconnected
okay,
state of things like that. So I know all the objects there in ADO.NET from 1.0 version of C Sharp, and I think I can utilize that. My old my old job is actually doing a CRM. Like Salesforce, will you create the objects and create the objects dynamically, right? In Salesforce,
uh-huh,
right? I also did that in N4 in the Philippines. I've been a part of N4, principal software engineer
yeah.
there, and then I created those kind of selection wizards and such kind of things. Building a dynamic way of building the objects and customers or business areas and activities and opportunities from the specific customers. It's a CRM and it's a bit dynamic. And then on our recent company, I have a requirement of something like creating a repository, a very simple repository, and then integrate the two databases together. And
Mhm.
I utilize Dapper, and I cannot utilize Entity Framework because Entity Framework is not really dynamic. So the only thing is Dapper by that time, and it's a hell of implementation. So I need to write everything in a SQL statement, and it's very difficult. Just for example, bulk insert batch. How can I do this in Dapper? Should I really pass on
Oh,
write all those things, and then I have the skills of creating this thing, and I have envisioned this one. It's a collective experience. It's not only my experience, right? It's also
uh-huh.
my fellow developers and architects say that I really would like a method that I just you know what just the list of entity batch it. And it's the real batch, not just
Okay.
simply an iteration. And I can explain it later. And
All right,
then and then I
cool.
came up with the idea, something like that, and started it
Okay.
from there.
Yeah, well, I apologize for interrupting you, but I was really curious and yeah, just wanted a little clarification to that before we continue with the rest of the
Yeah.
features. But this is really great. Yeah, so I'll let. I'm sorry about that. I'll let you go and
No,
I'll
it's
let
good,
you
John.
continue
Good.
your talk. All right.
Yeah, yeah. Yes, so we are in the class handler. So this is the feature that would allow you to intercept the the hydration, the deserialization and serialization process of the model. So in RepoDB, all you're gonna have to do is to implement a class that implements the iClass handler interface. And the purpose of this is to allow you to handle which specific model you would like to. So in our case, we are using the person model, right? I am gonna handle this person model. And when you implemented the iClass handler interface, you will have a two method called get and set. And the get is actually the one being invoked if you are retrieving the data from the database, like execute query, query, and query all. And the set is actually the one that is being invoked if you are pushing the data towards the database, like delete, update, insert, merge, and batch operations or batch insert, for example, things like that. And how I'm gonna utilize this person class handler? Okay, all you're gonna have to do, you go to your model, okay, and then just put class handler interfacer, and then type of what is actually the class handlers. You can see here, person class handler. Okay, so that's it. And on RepoDB, we're gonna use the class handler. So in this person class handler, I'm gonna actually put a comment, a breakpoint here, and then so that RepoDB will gonna handle that later. Break that later. So, but there is also, if you would like to remove the explicit mapping, that's actually the explicit mapping because you put an attribute into the model. You can also utilize RepoDB requested by the community of .NET because they are actually using multiple ORMs and they would like to make that the model is very clear, nothing else. I would like model class and properties. RepoDB also supported that one, driven by the community of .NET. So you can now put an entity here, for example, person. And then in that person entity, I would like to put class handler. And what is the class handler? The class handler is actually the person class handlers, for example. And that's it. And automatically, this is also equating the one that we have set up before by attribute. You can also see a property handler here. You can also something like DB type. You can also say what's the table equivalent in the database, DBO data, or that's something like sales.person, right? It's not in a default DBO. So you can also do it like that. And this is what we call implicit mapping. And of course, the way how you're going to do this is that use this one in your registrations, or just call it once so that you're actually mapping all those. But let's just go to the class handler here. This is the class handler class, and I put the breakpoint, and then I'm going to run it. Now it's running slow. I don't know why.
Sometimes we don't have enough offerings to the demo gods.
Yeah. So I put a record here, Anders Andersson. He is actually from Stockholm, Sweden. And then I'm going to insert him. As you can see that RepoDB already invoked those set method, right? And it's passing all the entity that you pass from the client as well. There's no change to that one. But here, what I'm going to do is that it gives you an opportunity to validate the content of this entity. If you would like to move something like validation here, you would like to make translation, if you would like to make trimming, for example, you would like to calculations, whatever you would like to, whatever operations, you can actually put it here before you save the data into the database. In this example, I'm going to put a handled keyword here, and then instead of putting something like Anders Andersson, I just put Anders Andersson handled, and then return the entity, and that entity will be the one will be inserted to the database, as you can see here. So it's handled, and then now I'm gonna query back the entity. As you can see, every time I query the entity, the first, of course, is John Doe, right? But there is no changes that we're going to do for that. But the second, I'm gonna run this one. The second one entity is actually the Anders Andersson, and on this one, the get, I also do harmonizations. You can do the validation. You can verify against the DB reader here, the instance of the database radar or DB radar, that SQL data radar that we use when we're trying to hydrate the model. And you can also compare the content of this entity, whether that is actually exactly the same as what we have in the data radar. The position of the data radar is actually equivalent to what we have hydrated to this model. And you can handle the things here. So here for now, for me, the name that we get from the database is this one, but I'm removing those handled, and then it returned the normal name. But in the sense in between, really, before you save the data into the database and you bring back the data to the client, you handle those one, right? You can do whatever you would like to. So that's we call it interceptions, about the way how we hydrate and serialize and deserialize the model. So that's actually the class handler, and also the next is actually the property handlers. If we have the class handler, we also have property handlers, and this is a feature that will handle the property level. And on this one, I'm going to showcase the way how we put an object from C# into a string type in the database, and then read the string type in the database and return it as an object into the application. So it's a complex way, but that can be handled in a in a class property handler. In this one, all you're gonna have to do is to create a class and implement an iProperty handler interface, and this contains two generic types here. The first one is actually the type of your database, and the second one is actually the type of your property. Okay, so here in the person model, I would like to say to handle this address column, which is equivalent to the address column here. This address property. And then I don't want a string. I want an object address, which contains 3 columns or 3 properties, which is street, postal code, and country. Okay, so I'm going to have to do is to put it here, and then I will put a handler for that. I already have created the property handler for that one. So this is the string in the database and address property. And this is, I name it person.address property handler. And all I'm going to have to do is the same. Just put property handler. Oops. typo, and then property handlers. This one. Yeah, of course, I'll just remove this one so that there will be no disturbance on the breakpoint. So I'll just, but you can actually put them together if you would like to, but it will slow down the process, of course, because you're handling both. So, but here you can see, I'm gonna run this one. But before doing that, since we have changed the structure of the data, I'm gonna truncate the information in the database, and then also just showcase it to you here, and again run the applications. And all I'm gonna have to do here is to insert an object into the database, right? So I already prepared that object here to speed it up. And during insertions, instead of putting a string, I put an object here as a JSON object. You can see it contains those three properties, right? And then I'm gonna send this one. And now you can see that it's actually breakpointed here, and the input is actually handled properly. This address, you can see that the address has been handled on which property is actually the property name of this person model. And then the property address of the person model, as you can see here. And then I'm gonna return this address as a string, but it's serialized as a JSON convert via Newton's of JSON as a string JSON object. And I'm going to save this one in the database, as you can see, and then run it again. And you can see that the one that I saved in the database is actually this one. Again, there is a legacy system, for example, that we are leveraging. We are integrating that we have XML. We have also JSON or whatever kind of or binary format, right? And if you sometimes you cannot read it, right? And here, property handler can handle that one. So for in this case, it's JSON, very simplified. And I'm going to query the data from the database. As you can see, the get method is also being called, as you can see here. So the one that I read from the database is actually this string, but I'm gonna deserialize it back to be an address. And then I'm going to run it, and then you can see that the results are here is address. Now again, I'm gonna query this one to showcase to you. So I'm gonna return that. As you can see, it's actually hydrating into this property, right? It's setting it. You can see, and then you can see in the results are turned the controller, and the result is actually containing those person that has an address here. You can see that's why it's also returning in the calls here. So that's actually for the property handlers. And I'm gonna move into the next feature, which is actually the batch and bulk operations. This is a very, very important feature that I mean maybe one of the highlight in RepoDB that I can showcase to you guys. So, but I have a second screen here, and batch and bulk operations. Where are you? You are here. Yes, cool. Yes, so I have a very simple console application here with the same database I'm using, person, okay? And I'm also using the same database and also connected to my local machine. Maybe just to clear everything, I'm gonna truncate the information in my database. And I created a very simple method here, 4 methods. I do atomic, do batch, do bulk, and do dynamic. And then first, of course, I do truncate. As I mentioned earlier, you first initialize RepoDB, call always this one, the initialize method. And then after that one, you can now call all the operations. Like Dapper, as I mentioned earlier, when you open a connection, you can now call the methods automatically here. So connection and then insert, whatever it is now accessible to you. It's very raw, actually. So as simple as open connection and then call the operations. Here, I'm gonna truncate first the person, and that's okay, the person table. And here, what I'm doing in the do atomic method is that I created a method yielding of the list of person here, and then just simply return the number of people based on the count that I have passed. Actually, here I'm gonna pass one by one later. And here I iterated it one by one and insert the information to the database. So it's very atomic. It's one by one as an iteration. How many rows is that? And then the batch is that I'm calling the batch operation called insert O. Okay, it's the same. nothing else. And then we are recording how much time it's actually taking to insert those operations. And for the bulk, I'm using the real bulk operations. Now I'm going to remove this one. I'm going to explain this one later. So it's very important. And it's very simple. And on the do dynamic, which is the very popular in Ørsted when they are using RepoDB, we are using this one. It is only existing on this ORM and not on the other ORM. So that's why I think it's a bit highlight. So here, the way how we actually use our operations is that if we have rows less than 30, the way how I actually look at it, it is much still faster compared to using the batch if you're actually putting big data into the database. Something like 200 columns or 50 columns on top of that. And it's much more still faster iterating it rather than doing a batch and bulk operations. But if we saw that the record is less than 1,000, and then we just use the insert all, and if it's more than 1,000 or equal to 1,000, we use the bulk insert. Apology for that. And here, I actually have the rows count here. 100 rows I'm inserting, and then I'm calling those operations, and I'm showcasing it to you now. Maybe I'll just comment this one, and then I'm going to showcase it later. So I would like to share to you the difference of this one. So now I'm actually inserting 100 rows each, right? You can see here. And then I'm recording how much time it is in every operations. So you can see, using atomic per 100 rows is 0.3, and then the batch is 0.2, and then the bulk is actually 0.30. It's much more slower than atomic. Okay, now I'm gonna look at the database, and you can see that the 300 rows has been inserted here. But I'm gonna make something like 1,000. What happens in 1,000 if we're gonna insert that? So now the atomic is 1.22 seconds, the batch is 0.25 seconds, but the bulk is 19 seconds. Okay, and now let's go to 10,000. What happened? Atomic is 11 seconds, batch is 1.71 seconds, but bulk is 0.44 seconds. And lastly, I'm gonna insert something like maybe 30,000 to showcase to you, maybe 20,000. Yeah. So you notice the difference, right? When you are inserting multiple records and you are doing it atomic, like Dapper and Entity Framework, they are becoming very, very slow, right? And although Entity Framework nowadays, the AF core is now supporting the batch operations, they're doing a very, very big merge statement just to accommodate this request. It's only RepoDB and LLBLGen of Franz Boma is doing the things actually about the batch. But they are not supporting the bulk. You can see earlier, we are inserting 10,000 records is 0.44, but here 20,000 records is 0.39. Let's go to the database so I'm not deceiving you. It's 60,000 rows here available because this 20,000 rows, 20,000 each has been inserted. Imagine that you're inserting 20,000 rows in less than 1 second, right? And here at least in our organizations, we are actually merging information from one system to another system, from our vendors database toward our database internally, and pass it on to the AMQ for asynchronous pattern, for example. And RepoDB is just doing the things. This is a matter of the lightning fast insertions because of this batch and bulk operations. And here I can see what happens if I'm gonna do dynamic. Actually, the do dynamic is actually the one that does know what and what method and how do I call it, something like that. And it just know itself when to switch into this tree. So again, if you're inserting big table by number of rows, dynamic is, atomic is much more faster. But if it is less than 1,000, it's actually a batch, and then bulk is greater than 1,000 or equal to 1,000. And dynamic knows how to use and what to use on each situation. It's when to use when to use what, for example. So 0.01 seconds, and then for 10,000 row, let's try to do that. Then I'm now in 48 minutes on this demo. I hope I have demoed a lot now, but another one more demo after this one. So targeted operation, you can see the dynamic operations is a bit faster compared to them. So that's how it is. And also would like to highlight what happens behind the scene if we are doing this one. I will explain it. I'm gonna open a profiler here on my SQL Server. And then I clear this one. And first, of course, I'm gonna run these applications. Yes, so the profiler is here. I'm gonna empty that one, and now I'm gonna run the atomic. What happened? So I'm inserting 100 rows only. Okay, so for 100 rows, what happened behind the scene? Now you can see that it creates 100 insert statement, right? So that's because it's atomic, it's one by one, and we are passing the correct value here. And what happened behind the scene if we call the batch? So in the batch, by default, it's actually batching 10. It's only creating 10 insert statement, 10 round trip to the database, and then insert those and match those property alignment based on the SQL statement that has been generated. As you can see here, it's only created 10 executions, right? And then this is it. And then, but again, I'm gonna clear this one. And then on the batch, you can also do it something like this. You know what? I would like to batch size it. No, here, of course, in the do batch. So when I'm inserting all, I would like to change the batch size of it by default, not 10. I would like to make it something like 50, for example. Okay, and then I'm gonna rerun those batch operation here. You can see that here, it only created 2 insert statement. I mean, 2 round trips against the database, but it creates a lot. I mean, very, very big insert statement. You can see here, right? But it's because it's batching. I mean, the real batching of the informations. And also, what happens if I'm gonna do the bulk operations? Okay, in the bulk operations, it uses the real bulk operations. I mean, the right to SQL Server that's using those. Yeah, the SQL bulk copy of SQL Server utilizing that one. You can see, maybe I'm gonna what happened to the bulk because I executed the dynamic, but I'm gonna do the bulk operations again. Clear this one. You can see what happened behind the scene here. It's a real bulk, as you can see. There's no record here. That's because the background, I mean, SQL Server transferred the files as a stream and then inserted back to the table. That's why it's ignoring everything. It's ignoring the constraint, after the primary key as well. If you are actually not handling that properly, it will be ignored. Things like that by the batch. That's why it's very, very fast. So that's the difference between the three. Okay. And one more thing that I would like to highlight in the bulk and the batch operations here, if I do the batch operations, you can see here, and then now I stop the profiler. You can see. If you do the batch operations, so I have an entity of 100 that I had created here. You can see, right? That's the model, but their ID is 0 by default. After you inserted it, the ID will be set back to you if that is actually an identity. Otherwise, the actual ID will be resulted back to you if that is not an identity for the non-clustered environment, for example. As you can see here. So, and then if you go to the bulk operations, here you can see the bulk operations the same. And then you can see here the people is actually does not have an ID yet. And if you do the bulk insert, by default, bulk insert is not doing the thing because it's very impossible for you to get the information from the database when you do the bulk operations. And that's true, even though you're using the SQL, the right to server, you're calling the right to server method of the IDEO.NET as SQL bulk copy class. And in RepoDB, you have an option. So someone is return identity. And what's happening behind the scene on this one? If I'm going to set it to true, you can see here, it's actually returning the record for you. I mean, at least those ID. automatically. And how that's happened? It's impossible to do it in the batch and bulk operations, right? And also there's another tweak here that something like use sudo temporary table. You can actually true this one or false this one. Okay, in RepoDB, if you actually enabling the returning of the identity back to your model, RepoDB is doing the things in the background for you. So I'm gonna go to the documentations and the bulk operations here for you. So here, there's a switch here. There's a documentation here. We utilize the SQL bulk copy and then write to server method, and then is return identity. If no, it's directly inserted to the database table without doing anything. But if it is yes, I'm gonna use sudo physical table or not. If it is yes, then I'm gonna create an actual physical table in your database, okay, and utilize that one. And if it is no, which is actually decision based, this is actually the temporary table hash temp table. That is a decision based on your connection, and then it will not gonna create the physical table, but it will still use that one, and then it's gonna utilize both of them to use the insert into statement into the actual table. And after that insert into statement, it will actually return the identities generated. That's why we actually retrieve those identity through this technique. That is what we call the pseudo temporary table. That's also the purpose here. And I actually close the profiler, but again, apology for that. Spend another 1 more minute to open that one. I need to showcase it to you guys, so that you would know what's really happening behind the scene. So I want to do a profiling for this one, and I just showcase to you. So here you can see I'm actually returning the identity, and I would like to use the sudo temporary table, physical table here. What happens behind the scene after that one? Okay, RepoDB first created a temporary table, RepoDB order call. I mean, a RepoDB bulk insert person. This is the temporary table, but this is still physical table because it's not temporary table, right? And this is only copying with structure. And then after that one, RepoDB bulk insert into this table. Okay, and after that one, it's merging the data from this table going to this actual table, and then returning the identity, as you can see here, output identity that insert. That's why it can get the identity, and then at the end of the day, we will drop those temp physical table. Okay, so now if I'm going to use something like this one is false, which is the default one. If I'm going to run it again, as you can see here, it's the same thing, but here you can see that it's actually session-based temporary table. It's created this one, right? It's the same. But here you can see that this is session-based. It means that if I open connection, I'm processing multiple entities on the same table, I can still have multiple RepoDB bulk insert person in a different session base. They are registered differently in the actual temp database of the SQL Server. It's a session base. So if the connection is closed, automatically this is deleted. And the purpose of this one is to give you an opportunity to, if you think you are not running a parallelism, use physical table. That is much more faster always because it's actual physical table. But if you think you are running multiple insertion, bulk insertion in a parallelism state, processing together the data using the same table, then use the session-based temporary table. And that's actually the highlights of this two here. And not just that, it's also happening in the bulk merge, the bulk delete, and the bulk update, the same operations here, for example. So same of them. And then you can also because this is the highlight in RepoDB, and that's existing with the other ORM. And you can also just trace this one, profile this one if you would like to. And the last feature that I would like to discuss, so I have actually 57 minutes now. But the last feature that I would like to discuss to you guys is the dynamic support of RepoDB. And again, this is not the dynamic in a sense that dynamic in .NET ecosystem, but it's actually dynamic in a context of an ORM. I mean, like Entity Framework, you cannot do dynamic approach there. Dapper, you cannot do that. I think it's only ORM Lite, you can also do the same thing, but RepoDB also support that. So as you can see here, so again, I installed the library, and then I call the initialize method to initialize the method, and then I created each method here. So do truncate the data first. You can see I don't have the model. I just truncate the table person. it's the same. You can also do it like this, passing your model, right? But here, I don't have the model. Truncate the person, and then insert all the data you can see here. And if you try to see here, there's no model. It's actually dynamic object. It's an anonymous type, right? So I'm inserting all the anonymous type. I can also insert specific here. I can also just target specific column. I don't want to insert in the address. I don't have the record it yet, and then I just want to insert in the person or name only. I can do that. And you yes, and here you can also do query all the person. And also I would like to query only the person, but only ID and name. And I can also do the query, for example, the data in the database where the name is equals to this one. Or I can also do it like this one, which is actually the data that has an ID 1. And I also do a merge like this, something like merge the person using this new dynamic. This is only the name and address, and then I'm using the qualifier name, same as before. And then also do an update like that. So ID 1, I would like to update it with this new record, and then delete it, delete all, do count, and then do count all is the same. I'm going to showcase it to you. So I will add a breakpoint here. Let's do it one by one. "15 more minutes, Sir Jun, and I promise I will gonna finish this demo."
Sure. No, this is really awesome. I'd like to go through the end.
Yeah. So here you can see the truncate. So we've truncate first the person. So there should be no record anymore here. It's already truncated, right? So now I actually generated 1,000 people, and then I just insert all of that one, and then I can see that I have 1,000 results set here. That's actually 1,000 row that I inserted. See, the 1,000 row has been inserted here. And I can also just simply insert Anderson, and then it will give me the ID that has been inserted. That's 1,001. You can see if I'm going to execute it again in the database, the last ID here is actually Anderson. You can see here. And just, of course, just counting the records from that, and then query all the data. Hey, this is a bit highlight. If I'm very lazy sometimes, and then I have been asked by my PO, you know what, can you integrate this data to this data database? It's much easier for me to use RepoDB rather than using SSIS or whatever tool, because I just create source connection, destination connection, query, and then back insert, and then that's it. But here you can see I also do it like this, dynamic operations, that it return expand the object, and you can just access the data immediately without even having a model. It's very simple. You can play around with it. And that's for me, I guess it's a cool thing that it's a bit highlightable on this one. And I also just can query the name and only the address of that record, and I'm just excluding other columns because I am not interested in those. And then I also can query something like this specific record from the database. So this person is also queried. And I can also merge, so making sure that, okay, the name 10 here will become an address, become Ghent of Denmark. And then I'm going to query that one again. And then you can see that it has actually updated in the database. If you go here, the 10 is actually updated in the database. This is the name 10, right? The 11th row, of course. So that's it. And then do update, for example, the first column, the first row, I would like to update the name to address this one. Of course, it's only targeting certain columns. I didn't add all the columns here. It's only touching those columns, update name, address, where, something like that. Or update name, address from table where. That's only the statement and nothing else. And it's also traceable if you are passing the trace object. And if I query those one, you can see here, the one that I get from the database is this is the content already. And you can see here that oops, now it's not responding. We are working with Microsoft, so that's really happening, guys. You can see here the one is Michael Pendon and then Ghent of Denmark. and yes, of course, do count. I also mentioned it earlier, so you can just simply count how many records in the database that has this name, like name. You can see that it's a query field. It's not an anonymous object. It's not a type, but it's actually an query object. So it's query field and query group. You can also pass that here, and this is very robust because you can this is the most fastest way of doing querying the things from the database. There's a lot of things there, and they're all supported as well. And also, if I'm going to query that one, you can see that the result is actually this one. You can see all the like data in the database, name, 10 like. So you can see here, so it has been queried, and also delete specific informations. You can see, without me having the model, I was able to actually manipulate the data against the database, right? So that's actually the technical demo out of it, but I would like to highlight as well. Still have 11 minutes here. So RepoDB has our website, repodb.net. Just go there and it will guide you where to start, but you can also read all the information, sir. It's well documented. And get started. Yeah, each database RDBMS that is being supported has its own get started page. Features that you would like to play around, we have a lot of features here that has not been discussed. Expression trees, hints, for example, like you can just also query the data like person, and then I would like hints with tab lock, or you can just simply query the persons, and this is low level or row level isolation level, not on the connection level. You can do this, unlike the other ORM. Here you can do it. Implicit and explicit mapping, the one that I actually showcased to you before, mapping of column, identity, primary key, class handler, property handler, table, and entity, and also the type itself. You can also see that, okay, you know what, I would like the type, date, time to be always date, time, to in the database. You can also do that. And also would like to have the property handler for the date, time. Let's say I would like to save the data into the database always in a UTC format, or read it from the database to become localized kind. You can also do that here. And a lot of things here. It's well explained in the features, and also the operations you would like to. It's also documented. Other important things is also documented here. And I would like to also highlight the references. References is actually the things that is not supported by RepoDB, but you can utilize as a reference in your implementations. Unit of work, for example, is not supported by RepoDB, but we have a references here that you can implement unit of work using this approach. Things like that. So you can also implement it on your own. And releases, of course, all the packages of RepoDB is here. So one by one, we actually do the releases updates here, and it's very active because I'm pushing RepoDB always into the NuGet package. It's a NuGet page, and also the Blazor if we have a highlight that we would like to hear. So for example, announcing the version 12.1.5, which is the major release of RepoDB that supports dynamic into the bulk operations. And of course, guys, also I would like to ask your supporter just star the repository here in GitHub, and then so just go to my GitHub and star it, and then share it to your friends, to your colleagues, to your families, to whoever you would like to share it. Actually,
To
talk,
everyone.
things like that, to everyone. Yes, please. And lastly, not the least, I would like to highlight that I am in collaboration with Franz Boma, who is actually the creator of LLBL Gen ORM. So he actually already put RepoDB as part of the venture, which is the most official, I mean, not official, but maybe something like near official benchmark for ORM worldwide for .NET. And recently, I have made an update in RepoDB, and for the first time, RepoDB beat the hand-coded materializer. So we are the fastest ever. We have beaten it, and then Francois told me that, how did you do that, Mike? You are now again cheating. No, I think I explained to him that I made additional compilations in the anonymous ties to beat this one. So historically, we cannot beat that one. And there's also instance, for the last 2 years, we are always the fastest ORM, as you can see here, just right behind this hand-coded, and we cannot beat that one. And recently, I made a mistake on my update, and then And then the LinkUDB actually beaten us on this one. I guess there's an instance that LinkUDB beat us, but eventually here in the .NET 5, we are actually the fastest and the most efficient ORM, and Dapper is actually here, so it's a bit slower compared to the other here. There's a lot. And here also the efficiency, we are the most efficient just right after the hand-coded materializer. Imagine the fact you declare variable var1, there's no logic, that's hand-coded. But in RepoDB, something like var get one. We put a method on top of that. So inside the get one method, that's the memory that we are using. And also that's the performance that we are aiming here during the compilations. We call it ahead of time compilations expression. And yes, and I'm also collaborating with the creator of this data SQLite and core MySQL data and MySQL connector like Brainer. How do you call it? It's he's actually a contributor here. So Brad DeBringer, yeah, Grainer, and also Simon Kraft is also a contributor. I mean, it's a very popular open source, guy. He's also a contributor here. So and he's using RepoDB. Thanks for that, Simon. And also, last but not the least, Scott Hanselman. Also, if you didn't know it yet, Scott Hanselman also tried to make a blog, which you can also try to revisit maybe and start from there. So he sees actually not maybe promoting, but something like how do you call that one? I forgot the word. Endorsing, yes. Endorsing to the .NET community. Yes.
He did have that exploring the .NET open source hybrid ORM library,
yes.
RepoDB.
Yes.
In July.
And the trends of RepoDB, I started 2018. For the first 2 years that I am actually stabilizing RepoDB, it's not open to the public. Maybe I started communicating it to the Reddit, but not to the public. And for the first 2 years, we only have 20,000 downloads. Started last year, we actually opened it up. And then Scott Hanselman also tried to make a blog here around July. And you can see that for the less than 1 year, we have downloaded around 130,000 downloads. So it's actually a good thing, an indication that RepoDB is now being adopted by the .NET community. And I'm very thankful to that as well.
Yeah, congratulations on that.
Yes, Sir John, I think I am done with my demo today. And I would like to say thanks for this opportunity, showcasing it to our Filipinos.
Yeah, you're absolutely welcome, and actually just showcasing it to the world, our viewers. We I think we have a few viewers who are not from the Philippines, so thank you to them as well, and it's a great opportunity to show it to them. We do have some questions. Well, we do have several questions from Jojo Aquino on this. So just going through that. That's a lot of features. Where do all of those features reside? Which assembly?
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, go ahead.
The major assembly is RepoDB.core. Those features mostly reside on the RepoDB.core. So tracing, caching, and on everything else, the batch operations. There is a package called RepoDB.SQL Server, RepoDB.MySQL, SQLite, and PostgreSQL, for example. They are just an extensibility features. It means that they are only containing the features that would allow you to work on that specific provider, like building a merge statement in this RDBMS is different from the SQL Server, for example, and that's only the feature. There is something like a statement builder and the DB helper or things like that. But most of the features actually in the core, which is actually the RepoDB DLL only or package, and not the core. When it comes to the RepoDB.SQL Server bulk operations, it's only dedicated to the bulk operations and nothing else. So it's maybe the more features on the RepoDB and the bulk operations.
All right. And his next question was in the earlier demo. Yeah, how do you invalidate the cache? Or I guess if he's asking if there's a way to invalidate the cache beyond what is the setting.
Yes. If you are using the repository, there's a cache property. I would like to showcase it again, maybe here a little bit, Surgeon.
Sure.
So if you're using a repository, you can invalidate the cache. Simply just that cache and clear. If you would like to clear all the cache, but if you would like to just remove specific cache, for example, and just remove the people here, the one that I actually cached before, so you can invalidate it. So you control the invalidations. And I will never introduce the auto validation or auto invalidation of the cache in RepoDB because it's very extensive, and I would like to make RepoDB a bit lightweight, more on the area of micro-ORM rather than big ORM. So that's the reason. There are people requesting it, but I cannot do it for this purpose.
Okay, yeah. One of the most there's a joke about cache invalidation being one of the most difficult problems in
Painful, right? Painful. But I didn't limit you guys. I mean, you can still access the caching, and you can invalidate it all the time if you would like to.
Okay, that's great. And then his last question, or he says this is his last question, is what would you consider a major issue of RepoDB that might prevent users from using this as opposed to other ORMs, I suppose?
Okay. First, I will be very frankful. RepoDB is quite new to the community, and it's still gaining traction and also gaining trust from the community. So that's the first issue there. But of course, it's only me for now, and I'm also trying to find sponsorships on this in the near future. Maybe company sponsorship that put this name of this company so that the community maybe have this confidence to use this RepoDB, right? Use this library. So, but for now, I guess that's one of the issue. And the second thing is that there is a limitation page in RepoDB, and that limitation page explains to you all the limitations that this library could not use. Okay, and then but there's also an equivalent alternative solutions and every limitations, and I explained it well there. So I think it's better to read these limitations before you use this library, so that you would know, this is RepoDB could not something like do composite key, or could not do something like auto-calculated columns, something like that.
All right. Thank you for that. Maybe I actually have my own questions that I'd like to ask.
Yeah.
I'm because I think you extensively use bulk insert in your in I mean that's at least those are some of the key features. Are they I mean I would expect that it's available for SQL Server, right? But I'm not sure what other databases are you able to do bulk inserts in, or use with RepoDB?
Only SQL Server for now, but I actually made a tweet about which next database I would like to support it. I guess the community would like to put it in Postgre as well. Postgre and MySQL connector is supporting it, and we are still on top of developing this. So, but maybe it's a bit critical. That's why I need to be still the architect on this area when it comes to implementation of this bulk insertions in Postgre. And if there's somebody from the community who can actually contribute, it's also welcome. But I think I still need to architect the way how it's being implemented to just align the way, the experience, how simple it is to use it.
Yeah.
But for now, SQL Server.
Yeah, that's the difficulties of open source and development and addressing all those libraries that's inherent to it. But that's great, at least that's clear. But for the caching, I would expect the caching feature is available generally to most libraries or to most database flavors.
I'm not sure, but I would say if you try to compare it in the context of an ORM like Dapper, I think you need to do it manually. Entity Framework, I don't think they're supporting it. They're not, I guess. And any other ORM is not supporting it. But here it's actually embedded. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's one of your competitive advantages. But I mean, is that's not limited to SQL Server, right? You can use it.
No, it's not. It's not limited
because this would be something that's already on the memory side of things, right?
Yes.
Cool. That's great.
John, I also would like, Sir John, I would like to highlight there that you can implement your own iCache object and then
Oh,
inject that
wow.
iCache object. Okay,
Okay.
it's not just only the memory object. So it means that you create something like file cache object, for example, and then in this file cache object, can I share my screen again, Sergeant?
Sure, sure.
So just for
Oops. Wait. Give me a moment here. I'll stop my screen. Okay.
yes, here. So here you can see, for example, on the references, I created something like JSON cache, and here, and this is actually the consolidated
Mhm.
restart tonight. So you can see here, I created my own iCache. I called it JSON cache and implemented the iCache attribute here. I mean interface there, and I actually handling all my caching via file, and then I inject it in RepoDB, something like this. So add it as a controller and then inject it
Oh,
automatically. So you control
so
your
you're
own if you would like to.
yeah. Okay, okay. So you could actually implement your own caching mechanism if,
Yes,
especially if you're
if you don't like
already
memory.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Or you're already, or you already have a native caching system, what Redis or something like that. Yeah,
Yes.
that awesome. That's great to know. All
It's a
right.
bit Swiss knife architecture in which you can just simply inject those,
Yeah,
but eventually it's still
yeah,
residing in the same library to
yeah,
simplification of installation.
yeah. To be honest, I'm totally blown away by the dynamic feature. It's something like, okay, that's great. I don't have to define my class. I mean, doesn't
Yeah,
mean
yeah.
I'm not encouraging people not to define
For
objects
those
or
lazy.
what, but yeah, and those I love the use case that you said that instead of having to make having to make an SSIS package instead of for ETL, you could just type up a quick um,
That's true.
ETL for using bulk
Yes.
insert, and
Yeah.
behind the scenes, SSIS uses bulk insert anyway for for
Yeah.
for quick transformation. So yeah, no, that is totally awesome. I just have to say. All right. Any final words for us, or any final things that you could share to everyone here?
Yeah, I think I already made my statement on that before I actually ended up my demo. So just please support RepoDB, share it to your friends, your colleagues, and again, guys, I'm not making money here. So
Mm-hmm.
whether if there's sponsorship, it's still not. I'm not making money out of it. And right now, it's not yet integrated with the other company, and also not yet. I didn't bring it to the .NET Foundation yet, and also to the JetBrains, whether they have contacted some of it, but I'm not. I have a reason why I'm not actually bringing it there. The reason for that is to make sure that RepoDB is not being killed. It will just continue to grow, or something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah. That's understandable, and encourage everyone in here watching this either live or later on to support this initiative. So, I'd like to thank you, Mike. Thank you for sharing us this is such an awesome project. Thank you, and it's great to know that there is an alternative um, ORM out there that we could consider that has some features that are unique, and we appreciate that, and we'll personally we'll do our best to support you in your endeavor. So good luck. Thank you for being here.
Yes, thank you so much, and have a good day, everyone.
All right, thank you so much, Mike. So okay, so that concludes our PHINUG dev sessions for tonight. I hope you enjoyed that. It was I learned really a lot tonight. And again, let me take this opportunity to thank the .NET Foundation, the Virtual .NET Users Group for hosting this event. So yeah, follow our meetup group. That's meetup.com. Look for PHINUG, PHINUG. Follow us on Twitter on at PHINUG, and yeah, watch this space for more. And I'll probably see you next month. So maraming salamat at magandang gabi sa inyo lahat. This is John from Manila. Yeah, good night everyone, and hope you learned a lot. Thank you very much.